Working hard was never the skill Japan built a reputation on. Something else was. And the difference between those two things has nothing to do with effort. It's a completely different definition of what getting better even means. Whether that's your job, your own business, your degree, or just the way you run your house. Stick with me until habit 5, because it's backed by a number from one of the most famous factories on Earth. A number that sounds like a disaster until you understand what it's actually measuring, and it will change how you look at your own mistakes. Habit 6 has an actual official term, one that's been formally recognized in writing by the Japanese government itself, awarded to real people for doing something most of us would consider too small to matter. Once you hear it, you'll measure your own effort differently. And the last one? I'll save that for the end because it's the quietest habit on this list. It won't show up on any resume, but it says more about a person's character than almost anything else on it. Let's get into it. Before the list, one concept, because everything on it comes back to this. Japan has a word for it, Kaizen, change for the better, small and constant. Not one dramatic overhaul. A correction made today, then again tomorrow, indefinitely. You can see it in a car factory, adjusting a workstation by 2 inches. Or in how a game company like Nintendo is famous for quietly delaying a release for months over a detail most players would never consciously notice. The Western default treats improvement as an event, a resolution, a seminar, a big push, then back to normal until the next one. Where most Western routines draw one line, broken versus fixed, done versus not done, Kaizen draws a much longer road, with a mile marker at every single day. This isn't only a factory idea, and it isn't only a corporate one. It applies exactly the same whether you clock into an office, run your own freelance business, study for a degree, or manage a household nobody's grading you on. Anywhere something gets done more than once, Kaizen has an opinion. Keep that map in mind. Every habit on this list comes back to it. You're scrolling a client's feedback email, or a professor's comment on a returned paper, or a customer's 1-star review of your own small business. Whatever it is, you read the words on the screen once, and from that point on, the words are the whole story. Nobody actually goes back to look at the thing being described. Habit 1. Before you decide anything that matters, you go look at the actual place with your own eyes. There's a specific term for this in Japan, genchi genbutsu, literally actual place, actual thing. It was built into the shop floor philosophy of the engineer Taiichi Ono at Toyota in the decades after the war. It's part of why construction equipment makers like Komatsu train engineers to inspect machinery on site, rather than trust a diagnostic printout, and why a chain like 7-Eleven Japan has store supervisors physically walk individual stores to watch how a shelf is actually being used by an actual customer. Picture the version of this that actually has a face attached to it. A veteran line worker, decades into the job, still walking to the exact station where a defect happened before agreeing to sign off on any fix. Not because he doesn't trust the younger engineer's numbers, but because he's watched 100 fixes fail when they were designed from a printout instead of a flaw. Slow down here for a second because this is easy to nod along to and still not actually do. It's more literal than that. It means physically going to the machine, the warehouse aisle, the customer's actual desk, and watching the real sequence of events happen in front of you before you're allowed to propose a fix. A report should send you toward the actual place, not replace the trip. The shift. A dashboard tells you what happened. Standing in the room tells you why, and why is the only one of those two you can actually fix. That first habit lives at the level of decisions. Habit 2. You treat looking busy and being useful as two completely different things, and you actively hunt for the gap between them. Picture your own week, whoever you are. Back-to-back calls that could have been a message. None of it produces anything. All of it fills the calendar. In Japan, this gets a name, and gets treated as an enemy to be hunted rather than a fact of life. Muda, waste, specifically effort that produces no value at all. The idea comes out of Toyota's factories originally, but you can see the same instinct anywhere in Japan that touches a customer. A chain like 7-Eleven Japan, built almost entirely around eliminating wasted motion during restocking, so a single clerk can turn over an entire shelf in a fraction of the time it would take elsewhere. Or a retailer like Muji, stripping a product down to exactly what it needs to be and nothing else. No extra packaging, no extra step, no extra decoration justified by, well, it looks nice. It's a walk to a printer on the other side of the house or office, repeated 4 times a day. The shift. Busy was never the same as useful. One of them fills a calendar, the other one finishes something. Think about the last big decision announced in your life, at work or, honestly, even at home. Chances are it landed as a surprise, and everyone was expected to nod along on the spot. Habit 3. Before a decision is ever announced formally, it's already been discussed, one conversation at a time, with everyone it actually affects. There's a specific term for this, nemawashi, literally going around the roots, borrowed directly from gardening, where a tree's roots are carefully loosened and prepared weeks before it's ever transplanted, so the move doesn't kill it. In a Japanese workplace, the formal meeting is often just a formality. The real decision-making already happened quietly beforehand. But the same instinct shows up well outside any office, in how a neighborhood association plans a local festival, or how a family will often discuss a major decision individually with each person over the course of a week. So that by the time it's raised at dinner, it isn't news to anyone, it's just confirmation. Every person gets heard and gets to raise a concern while it's still cheap to change course, instead of after the decision's already public and reversing it would embarrass someone. Picture it in practice, away from any office. A family is deciding whether to move a parent into their home as they age. Instead of raising it cold at a big family gathering and putting everyone on the spot, one sibling talks to each relative separately over a couple of weeks. By the time it's discussed as a group, nobody's defending a position in front of an audience. They're just finishing a conversation that already started in private. The shift. A decision announced in public and a decision prepared in private can be the exact same decision. Only one of them survives contact with the people it affects. The first 3 habits live in how you think and decide. Habit 4. You report a problem the moment you notice it, before it's urgent, even when it makes you look like you don't have it all figured out yet. Picture a student who realizes, 2 weeks into a project, that they've misunderstood the assignment. The American default is to keep working quietly, hope it sorts itself out, and only say something the night before it's due, when it's already a crisis. The same instinct shows up in a freelancer who notices a project is drifting off brief and says nothing until the final delivery, hoping the client won't mind. In Japan, new employees are drilled on an acronym from their very first week, Ho-Ren-So. Hokoku means reporting progress. Sodan means asking for guidance before you're stuck. Together, it's treated as the bare minimum of professionalism, not a sign of weakness. Reporting bad news early isn't an admission of failure, it's the job. The standard is judgment, not volume. Say something when it could change someone else's plan if they knew sooner. The shift. A problem reported on day 1 is a conversation. The same problem reported on day 30 is a crisis. Nothing about the problem changed, only the timing did. We're getting into the habit I promised you at the start, the one with the number behind it. Habit 5. After anything finishes, success or failure, you sit down and honestly examine what could have gone better, without spending any of that time deciding whose fault it was. Most postmortems move fast in one of 2 directions. Assign blame and move on, or celebrate the win and move on. In Japan, there's a name for the alternative. Hansei, critical self-reflection, done as routine rather than punishment. The clearest example of it in practice isn't a meeting at all. On a Toyota production line, any single worker can pull a cord called the andon the moment they spot a defect, and the entire line calmly stops, sometimes thousands of times across a single day, at a single plant. The same discipline has since spread well past Toyota into how other manufacturers like Komatsu and Mitsubishi run their own plants. Imagine being the newest person on that line, hand hovering over the cord, half expecting to get in trouble for stopping an entire operation over what feels like a small thing. Then imagine a supervisor kneeling down beside you a moment later, not to scold you, but to say thank you for catching it early. Slow down here for a second because the number is the counterintuitive part. But every one of those stops is small, caught early, and resolved in minutes. The alternative isn't a line that never stops. It's a line that stops once, at the very end, in a far more expensive way. There's a quieter version of hansei that has nothing to do with any factory. It's the version where you finish a project that actually went well, and instead of moving straight to the next thing, you spend 10 honest minutes asking what you'd do differently anyway. The shift. Blame answers who. Hansei answers why. Only one of those two questions ever prevents the next mistake. Now here's the one with its own official term, recognized in writing by the Japanese government itself. Habit 6. You give the boring, unglamorous, nobody's watching part of what you do the same full effort as the part everyone will actually see. Most people scale their effort to how visible a task is. It's not laziness exactly, it's a rational response to where the praise is going to land. In Japan, there's a word for the opposite instinct, shokunin, craftsman, but carrying real weight beyond the job title. Picture a young sushi apprentice who spends the first year or more of training doing almost nothing but learning to cook rice correctly, treating the most invisible, unglamorous step in the entire craft as worthy of complete mastery rather than something to rush past. You can see the same instinct in the person who wipes down a train car handrail with total care nobody will ever compliment them for. Some of Japan's most accomplished craftspeople receive a formal government title for exactly this, Ningen Kokuho, a living national treasure. Picture an elderly craftsperson, hands weathered from decades at the same modest task. Stop here for a second because this is the actual thesis of everything on this list. What you do when nobody's grading you is the only real measure of how good you actually are at what you do. Stop here. Let that land. What you do when nobody's grading you is the only real measure of how good you actually are at what you do. The shift. Talent shows up in the moments people are watching. Character shows up in the ones they aren't, and only one of those two is actually rare. Stay here for the last one. It's the quiet one, the one that says more about a person than any of the other 6 combined. Imagine your worst day recently. You were late because of something outside your control. Something you'd worked on got dismissed in about 4 seconds. By the evening, you're not injured, exactly. You're just worn down in that specific, cumulative way a bad day wears a person down. Now imagine a Japanese commuter on a Shinkansen platform that same evening, having had an equally bad day, standing quietly in a perfectly straight line after the bullet train is delayed 40 minutes with no real explanation given. Just a tired person, standing still, waiting. Habit 7. When something is genuinely difficult, you carry it quietly instead of announcing it. In a lot of American life, venting about a hard day is treated as normal, even as a form of bonding. There's nothing malicious in it, it just spends a certain amount of energy on being heard instead of on whatever's actually wrong. In Japan, there's a pair of words for the alternative. Gaman, patient endurance, carrying difficulty without complaint, and gambaru, the active verb, to persist, to keep doing your best regardless of how it feels in the moment. It's a belief that the energy spent broadcasting a struggle is energy not spent solving it. Now, there's a real limit worth naming. Gammon isn't a virtue when it means hiding a problem that genuinely needs reporting. A late shipment gets reported immediately. A long, tiring day at the end of a long, tiring week doesn't need a group chat message about it. The shift. Complaining and enduring can look identical from the outside for the first 5 minutes. Only one of them is still standing, unbothered, an hour later. Here's everything compressed into 3 questions. Question 1. Am I deciding this from a report or from something I actually went and looked at myself? Question 2. Is what I'm doing right now actually useful, or does it just look like work? A full calendar was never proof of either answer, and neither is a long to-do list. Question 3. If this goes wrong, will I sit down and honestly examine why, or am I already rehearsing an explanation for someone else? 3 questions, 30 seconds. If a habit in your life fails all 3, that's the first one to fix. Think about what you actually did today. Not the version of it you'd put on a resume, the real version, hour by hour. Which number hit you the hardest? Which of these 7 did you not expect to see on this list? Tell me the number, 1 through 7, in the comments right now. And if this changed how you think about your own day, send it to one person you think is quietly better at what they do than they give themselves credit for. The one who never makes a show of how hard they're working and somehow still gets it right. See you in the next one.